Hey, what's going on guys? It is Kyle here, and today this video is going to be kind of like a about me. Now, I've had a lot of new followers recently, and a lot of people have no clue who I am or really my background or experience. So there is a ton of fake people on social media, people who appear to be much more successful than they really are, or maybe claim to have a lot more experience. And I am 100% guilty of this. So I want to be 100% transparent about my portfolio, what I've done, kind of where I've come from, and really my whole story. So stick around through this video and you'll learn really the breakdown of my portfolio and really more just about me. So I was born in a small town in Illinois. Population was around 40,000 people, and there's really no big towns near me. The closest town was about 2 hours away. So I've always been in a pretty small environment, which a lot of people think that you need to be in a huge metro, with millions of people to really make real estate work. I disagree with that. I think there's a lot of great smaller markets out there. So I'm gonna start my story around 2012. That was the year I graduated high school, and that's when I first got into real estate. So I had not been the greatest student throughout high school. I wasn't super focused on going to college. My dad had not gone to college. My mom had not finished college. So college was never really something that I wanted to do. I was much more focused on entrepreneurship. I like to get my hands dirty. I like to stay active. Most of my friends were studying to be like engineers, doctors, or something like that, when I couldn't have cared less about, getting good grades and going to a good college. So I graduated in 2012. Before I graduated, I don't remember, I think I was actually in like math class. I would scroll through Zillow and like realtor.com looking for houses for sale. Just a little bit of more background. My dad used to be in real estate back in his 20s and 30s, and then he sold his whole portfolio in his 30s after he started having kids. And he would always tell me that that was a big regret of his, was selling his real estate. So I always had that in the back of my mind, and I think with him being in real estate, the bug was naturally in me a little bit. So I love to look at houses for sale. I love to listen to podcasts like Bigger Pockets and just different investing podcasts. So I found this house for sale. It had been on the market for a long time, and they were asking too much for the house that it was and the location it was sitting in. If I remember right, they're asking somewhere around $20,000, maybe a little bit over, and I offered them $5,000 for this house. So most people would have said no, and they said yes. So I probably should have had a red flag that, oh no, this house must be really bad. But anyways, I ended up buying it before I graduated in 2012. So I was 18 years old, and I took that summer, me and a buddy, Austin Segas, we worked on that house. Dad gave us a lot of insight on do this, do this. My dad's very good at fixing things and very good at doing things pretty cheap. So was able to do that very cheap. And I remember renting that house out to my first tenant, Leroy, and receiving that first check was like, wow, this is awesome. Passive income. I'm finally seeing what this is. And it was just such a great experience. So not much more happened that year. I was working on that. I was doing some side jobs. I mowed yards. I did some landscaping, things like that. So 2013 rolls around, and I got a really awesome opportunity from my aunt and uncle, who they wanted to move. They actually moved in with my grandparents to help take care of my grandpa. And they had a house that needed some work, and they said, as long as you pay us this much for the house, we'll let you come in, remodel it, fix it up, flip it, sell it, and whatever profit you make above the price that we want you to pay us, you can keep. So it was a great deal. I had a ton of help from my dad. My cousins helped. Even two of my good friends helped out on that house. And so that really got me introduced to more of the flipping side of real estate. So we got that done, and we made some good money on that summer. And that was my first true flip. So we flipped it, and then from there I ended up buying another foreclosure with my dad. This is another real small single family house. It needed quite a bit of work, and ended up flipping that house. But I realized that flipping was more of a job, and I loved the long-term passive income, building more of an empire type feel. Flipping's great for quick cash, but it's not something that is going to, keep producing income. And I loved that passive income. So while these flips were going on, I was in a community college going for construction. I really didn't know the direction I wanted to go. I thought maybe I'd get into some sort of construction management degree. All my friends were going again for like engineering and being a doctor, and I just couldn't figure out quite what I wanted to do. So I was in this construction program doing a lot of hands-on training, working on houses and working on actually doing things physically with my hands, and realized that construction probably wasn't the direction that I wanted to go. And in the meantime, I was doing an internship with a local builder. So I was getting a lot of experience pouring concrete, studding up walls, shingling roofs, plumbing. I really got good at doing pretty much anything construction-wise. Now, just a little side note, I think it's great if you have construction background, but it's definitely not necessary. Actually, it can be a hindrance sometimes because I know how to fix things, I just want to do it myself. When in the real world, using the economies of scale, you cannot be doing everything yourself. You have to hire it out, and you have to be doing what is most valuable with your time, which for me, it's finding deals and managing them. Okay, so after I graduated that 2-year community college, I decided I was not gonna go on to be like a construction manager. Decided that flipping was, it was okay, but maybe not what I wanted to do. I really wasn't sure. I knew I loved real estate, but just wasn't sure what to do next. I always heard of wholesaling, and I knew of some guys down in St. Louis, Missouri, who were wholesaling houses. So I actually moved down to St. Louis around 2015, and I started working with those guys. When I moved down there, I bought a duplex that I owner occupied. So I lived in one side and I rented out the other side to a tenant. It was a great setup because I had 2 roommates in my side. They covered all my utilities and my tenant covered the mortgage. So I gotta back up just a little bit. I told you I bought that first single family house that I turned into a rental back in 2012. Well, right next to it, another one came up for sale about the same exact time. So I ended up purchasing that one, so I owned 2 right together. And I bought both of those for around $5,000 a piece. Now, back to St. Louis. So I lived in the duplex that I was owner occupying, but then I actually found down the street, I noticed a duplex was vacant and needed a lot of work. So I was mailing the owner letters saying, hey, I want to buy the duplex. Finally, he agreed to sell it to me. He sold it to me for $40,000. I put in $27,000. It was appraised for around $100,000. I rented it out, held it for a few years, and I actually just sold that a couple weeks ago for $102,000. So that was a great little profit there. But as I was in St. Louis, I was wholesaling with these guys, and I just realized that with wholesaling, it's like a paycheck. It's not really passive. It can be designed as passive, but it's just not what I wanted to do. I like the rental side, building equity every single month. So my story is all over the place, but after I finished that second duplex, I ended up deciding I was gonna move home back where I came from. But first I was gonna get my real estate license, and I decided to do it in a classroom setting. Now this was up in Peoria, Illinois is where I got that. So I was up there getting my license, and a buddy of mine who has an insurance agency reached out and said, hey, instead of selling real estate, why don't you try selling insurance? And I was like, oh boy, I guess I'm in a transitional period where I could try something new, so why not? So I ended up studying to get my real estate license and my insurance license, passed both of them, and I started selling insurance. Well, it was only a few months into that I was like, you know what, this is not for me. I love real estate, and I'm gonna go back to that. So I ended up moving back home and started focusing solely on real estate. So that was 2017 when I was selling insurance up there. And in the meantime, I bought a 3-unit property with a couple buddies of mine. It was a commercial chiropractor office with 2 residential units above it. It's a really cool story how we ended up turning that into student housing, and we ended up making really nice profit off that. So that's another story for another time. So I moved back sometime in 2017, and I went full-time into real estate. So I had my Illinois license, and I also had my Missouri license, so I was selling on both sides of the river. So I had always been listening to podcasts, and I had heard a lot about mobile home park investing, and I heard it was a great asset class. and I ended up going to a boot camp. It's like a 3-day boot camp put on by Frank Rolfe. He's a big park investor, and I fell in love with that asset class. So from like 2016, around there, I was looking at parks, but just couldn't ever find any. Well, after I moved back from the whole insurance gig and everything, I started looking a lot more into parks, and I was having a hard time finding any. But in 2018, after negotiating with a seller on his park and we couldn't come to terms, he's like, hey, I have 11 mobile homes for sale. Why don't we just package those up and you buy all of them? So I ended up purchasing those for around $87,000, all of them. They're all rented, so it's great cash flow. And that really taught me a lot about owning mobile homes. Not the actual park, but just the homes. So this is a little bit of a side story, but when I got back home from living up in Central Illinois selling insurance, I had actually approached the old contractor that I had been working for in college. He had a business where he sold a certain type of concrete tool, and I approached him about purchasing that company. That is a whole nother story for another time. I ended up negotiating with him. My dad and I negotiated with him to purchase this company. We had an agreement and it fell through at the last minute. But you know what? In hindsight, it was the best thing for me because getting into real estate full time was definitely the path that I wanted to go. So again, I was selling full time. I was doing pretty well. I came across several investors who had a large portfolio of properties. I ended up helping them sell their whole portfolio, which actually leads me to the story of the 4-unit that I currently live in. So I had listed this 4-unit of theirs for sale. And it was an okay deal. It wasn't anything, too exciting. There wasn't a whole lot of equity in it. But my dad stopped me and said, hey, why are you selling that thing? Why don't you buy it and live in it? I know it's not a great deal, but it's gonna allow you to live for free. So I was still living at home at the time, which is great. You save a lot of money, but I knew I was gonna be getting married soon, and it's like I need to get a place of my own. So I ended up buying this 4-unit from them, fixed it up, and my wife and I live in 1 unit, and we rent out the 3 other units. So there's several other smaller transactions in there that I didn't mention. I bought a 3-unit with a buddy of mine. We went in half and half, and that turned out really well. We ended up selling that thing for a pretty good profit. I bought another single family. I actually flipped a small piece of land. Other stories for another time. But I want to get on to mobile home parks. So I still in the back of my mind knew that I wanted to get into mobile home parks, and I just wasn't finding anything. Well, in 2019, an auction came up as a local auctioneer who was horrible at advertising, and he was advertising a mobile home park for sale. It was actually a man who passed away. His son had taken everything over and just ran it straight to the ground. So it was kind of a distressed situation. I didn't have any information on the property. I didn't have any leases. I wasn't sure who was paying and who wasn't. I didn't know who owned the trailers. It was a mess. But I did my research and talked to a lot of the residents in the park and got a good feel for who they were, what they were paying, so on and so forth. So I had a number in my head that I knew I was willing to pay for this property. And so when the auction came about, it was an online auction, and I was bidding, and I noticed that all the bidders pretty much dropped out except for me and one other guy. And so I had my number in my head, and we weren't anywhere close to it yet, and he stopped bidding. So ended up purchasing that property. That was in 2019, and that's really what changed everything for me, just as far as really being able to start scaling up. So about the same time that I bought that first park, I had been negotiating with another owner on a smaller park for years. Literally, I can look back and I have letters going back years to him. Now, he had started at a price that was way outside of my realm of possibility, and I negotiated him down over several years to a price that was like, this is awesome. So in 2019, I bought my first park and actually bought that second park the same year. So 2019 was a huge year for me. Now, as I sit, my current portfolio sits at 77 units, and that's a mixture of some single family, some small multifamily, and then the 2 parks. So I'm not huge. A lot of these guys, say they have thousands of units. I'm definitely not a massive investor. I've done around 90 units total, but again, I'm currently sitting around 77 units. So had a little bit of experience in wholesaling, a little bit of experience in single family, some small multifamily, now mobile home parks. So I have a good idea how things work, But my point of this video is I don't ever want to come across as someone who's like, you know, I know everything there is about real estate, I'm an expert, so on and so forth. So that's a little bit of my background. I love to learn more about real estate, and I'm always open to new ideas. So I hope you guys enjoy this channel. I just appreciate you guys watching this video. Hopefully you learned a little bit more about me, who I am. Just once again, if you guys don't mind, like and comment on this video. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to you in the next one.